06?
Very confused.
He was a freshman? So
they
they came in. They came in 08. They came in 08.
Yeah, so Michael was the captain.
it'll take you a little while.
Yeah.
We're actually live.
So he played with Tommy Interlecchio.
Yeah, T.I., yeah, great kid.
Great guy.
We can actually start
I love
recording now.
Yeah, like Tommy did.
Talk
To be on the
Tommy a lot,
safe side,
too.
may as well.
Yeah, so we don't forget.
Yeah, so Tommy's a friend of ours through the club world.
Yeah,
Tom, we helped Tommy when he started Predators.
Fancy there, just
Good
push
dude.
record.
real nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up
So
up
now
there.
we're
I grew up where
recording and
Tommy's from.
streaming.
Yeah, they're awesome.
What's that, John?
Like I
What
said,
does
it's
that
funny
mean?
because
It's
like, I got to know them
it's,
almost like an extension of my family. They were like little brothers.
Appears
to
that
me.
it's
Because
not
like I
doing
was,
what it's
old,
supposed to
you know
be
what I mean?
Was he in Nikki's
Go
class?
to YouTube.
No, they were younger. Nicholas would have graduated, and he came into Hofstra in '05.
Okay.
Okay, was diagnosed in '06, passed in '07. Seth's
We're
first
live.
year.
Now on
So
Facebook, we're
amidst
live
everything
too.
that was going
When
on
you
at
see these
Hofstra,
things, we're
John
live.
had taken the
Okay.
job at Duke.
We should put a
Ah.
timer on there. Do you want a
So it
timer on
was
there?
like really,
Or no?
really
Doesn't matter.
challenging
You've already got
because
7
yeah.
people.
that's where Seth
Nice.
was really instrumental in helping see Nick's vision to fruition as
here,
far as
how many
like
we
the
got?
events and
We got
stuff
0.
like that. You know,
We've got 7 people on
he
Facebook.
came in and promised Nick that no matter what had
I just need you to
happened,
pull in that video
he'd
for me,
always
Cliff,
be a
if you're,
part of
if you're
the
ready.
program.
Okay.
John
Hold
and
on a
he
second.
really we're in close communication
Where is
throughout
it,
Nick's
Barry?
fight. even though John was at Duke.
The second email,
Because the
first email
that
from me,
program was
yeah,
in
that one.
flux at the time, and Matt
So if you
announced
pull
he was
in, if you
there.
click,
So
yeah,
John
across
went down
recruitment
there
clips, it would be the
ate
third
that
clip.
program.
This one?
It
Yes.
presented an opportunity to John as well, because he was at Hofstra for so long.
Where's my
Sure.
timer?
It created an opportunity for Seth to come in and have a program of his own. And he was able to.
So you must have
really
seen
special
Ryan.
relationship.
You must see Ryan grow up.
Oh, when I met Ryan, he was a kid. Like,
Yeah.
He was probably 5 and 6 years
All you
old.
have to do
Yeah.
is go to download folder
And now
drag it
he's
in.
having himself
Yeah.
quite a
Perfect.
career.
Oh, he's unbelievable.
And then
Corey coached
there's
him
one
when he
other
was in
video
8th grade.
clip,
And Corey
um,
came home. He was at a camp, and Corey came home and said,
Can you go back
"This
to
kid
your
can
email
play."
and see
Well, it's
emails
funny
from
because
me?
like
Hold on a second.
last
Okay.
week, so I'll talk about our service mission in a little bit on the podcast, but we own and operate a
Okay.
guest family
You wanna
lodge.
do
which is
court?
quite
Can you go to
expansive.
your
It's called Nick's
emails
House,
from me?
and It affords families more than 3,000 nights of complimentary
Can
housing
you search
each
emails
year.
from me?
Relieves them of about
Possible?
2.5 million in out-of-pocket expense each year. It's for
It's
folks that are
C-Wake office.
pursuing
Yep.
advanced care, advanced clinical
And-
trials being offered in the Philadelphia metro area. We're gonna be building one in New York.
Can you
which
scroll
is
down a little bit?
"Oh, where?"
Yeah, we just conducted our feasibility study and our geographical analysis, and we're honing in on Astoria, Queens.
Interesting.
Yeah, so,
Really?
yep, yeah, we're gonna be constructing 4 Nick's houses over the next 15 years. That's
Keep
our
going.
vision for Nick's house.
Do you know what the date
So you
is?
see how critically needed it is.
No, it was.
Yeah.
And
it was
why
a
Astoria?
video. It was in
Are
an
you
old
trying to-
show. It was a commercial for
Geographical
Epic
proximity
Lacrosse.
to the post-medical
Would it
center,
be
which is
in
Memorial
here
Sloan
somewhere,
County.
Cliff?
Okay.
It's a video from
Accessibility
Epic.
to thoroughfares, public lines of transportation.
You know, there's a memorial out here in Long Island.
We do, we have a relationship with them.
Yeah,
But
'cause
that's the outpatient therapy, like, that's, they have just.
Oh, you want to be near where the surgeries are?
You have to, we have to be in proximity to where like bone marrow transplants are being conducted, stem cell transplants, and experimental medicine.
Got it.
What happens out here, we work with them, we started a wonderful relationship with the site on the island, but what it is, they have rooms,
Those are them.
okay?
Which one?
They are
Both of
infusing,
them.
they are doing more general
One should be
type of
beginning, one should be end.
treatments.
Yeah, it's not Manhattan.
Yeah, what's happening in Manhattan is experimental.
Yeah, I've been there.
And, yeah, so.
Mike,
It's
comfortable
incredible.
pushing these?
It is.
Incredible.
And
starting?
so,
Doing the
like, a
commercials
lot
and
of the
everything.
families, we
Okay.
see it, I'll talk about it
So I'm
later,
gonna put
but
that one in.
So the way we're gonna
what
do this,
we
Mike,
found was like, we just had Penn State.
I'm gonna
Penn
do.
Lacrosse was just at Nick's house.
We're gonna do the
And I
show
got
open.
some emails.
I'm gonna talk a little bit
The-
quick,
the-
introduce
the
our
night
guests,
Good.
of
and then we're gonna
their
move to these
visit,
2
right?
videos, which
So
is a
they
quick
came,
video on
they were,
recruiting,
like,
a
dumbfounded
quick
the
video
whole
from
time.
our
They're like,
sponsor.
we had no idea.
We'll
We
go
had
through the
no
show,
idea this
and
is
then we'll
what you
end
guys
with a
do. This
video
is
from our
amazing.
sponsor.
Like, how can we get more
And then
involved?
you can do the
know,
credits.
That's the
Don't forget
reaction.
credits.
Because
Great.
at the end of the day, most
That's pretty
people
much it.
assume
That's it, right?
Yeah,
because
this
of
should
our
be short,
branding
like
and
30
because
seconds.
of our lacrosse club, that like that's
Alright, awesome.
kind of what we are.
I'll make
They
sure.
don't realize
Here,
we're
Thanks,
a
Cliff.
organization
Yeah.
that's helped
We're live?
18,000
Okay. I'm gonna
families.
tell you that
Did
the
they
hardest
did they
part of
come when they
live
played
streaming-
Penn?
Yeah, they did.
Is going
So
live.
the night before Penn played
Everything
on
else, the
Sixth Street on
switching, the
Saturday.
cameras,
Yep.
the pushing shit in.
The captain of Penn
It's
State is one of my
always about,
boys,
Can I get
Who's
live?
that?
Tommy Wright.
It's the weirdest thing.
Great Pete. We just
Alright,
met
well,
him.
you're not
I just
going
met him.
anyplace.
I just met him. the emails that I got back from these kids was unbelievable. One of the one that stand out, like, I got a picture from Grant of him.
Now, which are the two
and
commercials we're
he's
doing
'8
first?
years old,
They're at the
and this is
bottom.
Ty Ryan
Oh, do the
Tierney,
first
because
one?
they're the
This
same
one,
age.
Okay.
this one, and
Right,
then this
that's
one.
the end of the
right
show.
Sent me a picture of
Okay.
him playing youth lacrosse.
And does he play this again
And
at the
he's got
end?
What's that?
Headstrong
Yeah,
laces
and you
on, and
play-
he's playing with a
No, the
Headstrong
credits
handle.
at the end.
Oh, this is
And
the
he
credits
goes-
over
The
here.
credits
So
go
let's-
after that.
Let's move that over here.
Today was an awakening. I
This
had
is good.
no
You're getting a
idea
little
this
bit
is
more
what you
experience
guys
doing
did.
this.
When
I
I was
like
8
Of
years
course.
old, I took the field wearing the laces and the handle. I had no idea what it meant, or I knew that it was just a popular color. I didn't realize the philanthropic impact that this organization has had until today. He's like, whatever you need from here on out. You had my support then, you have my commitment now. Like, I mean, you're talking like a
Talk
kid.
about this on the show, please.
That's the stuff that, you know,
Cliff,
that
what's
this is
over
what
here in
these-
this?
This is
Get
what,
ready.
what's
Hold on a
amazing
second.
is that like a kid like Ryan Tierney has seen and witnessed
Oh.
We have to
the
turn the volumes
evolution
up
of
too.
our
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, sure.
You know, we've had 13 years of progressive advancement, which is continuing to
Do you
strengthen
feel
our
like
commitment, because the
there are
mission
people
we serve
asking where
and
the
our
video
cause
is?
What's that?
is unique.
Yeah,
What's in this window here? This
So I
is
have-
the first
we-
commercial, or
we
this
just,
was the ending one?
Just so we can-
So
I
this
can
is the
go
first
over
one,
that
so that should go
Yeah.
forward.
I'm wondering if we should put up a timer. Let me put on a timer real quick.
Yeah, you
I
can
think
edit
6
that.
minutes?
Yeah, because people are asking where the timer, where the
6
show's
minutes.
starting. When's the show starting?
And then we can give you a
So
rough,
add
you can use
input,
it however you guys
Sound
want.
bites and stuff,
Yeah, exactly, we cut it up and repurpose it.
text.
But, just as an overview, I can promote it to like my, Instagram audience or whatever.
Timer.
LinkedIn.
Your mom spoke when Corey was on the field, and
Yeah, she does.
I got to tell you something. When you see her again or speak to her again, tell her it made a huge impact on my life.
Thanks, man. Like, I appreciate that. I mean, you know, it's hard. It's hard to publicly share the most vulnerable time of our life publicly with people.
That's
But
what I
what's
want.
interesting is that at the a baseline for Headstrong is the fact that something that Nick gifted to our family has been what has allowed us to move progressively forward through
Sure.
life in his absence. Because, like,
Yeah.
we were chatting earlier, and I'm like, how do you navigate life without, like, the patriarch of your family?
Yeah.
Like, the one who was, like, the common denominator between everyone. It's like you have to train yourself how to live again. I mean, that's what people don't talk about, you
Yeah.
know? It's hard, and I think what people find is, you know, somewhat triumph over tragedy, and we try to be an example of that.
Yeah.
Right? So, but when she speaks, it comes from the best of places, because it's, at the end of the day, there's no other agenda than her being a mom trying to
Yep.
honor her child. And I
Mhm.
think that's transparent in everything that we do. That authenticity is been a key motivator in our ability to continue to do what it is that we do. And, you know, it's like, I don't know, what she went through being a caregiver, and what we went through losing someone, and like, you know as well as I know, somebody in your family was, especially if your immediate family, affected by something.
Mhm.
Like, do you have siblings? Forgive my ignorance. But
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
do you have
2 sisters.
siblings? Do you have 2 sisters?
Mhm.
Well, like,
Count
guess
down
what?
to
Like,
10.
something happens to them.
What time do you want to start?
Number one,
At
not
1
only do you
o'clock?
feel
Just put one.
like an innocent bystander, but
No,
like,
that's not what I want.
I
It's not,
remember when my brother was going through treatment, I would
I just
call
wanna
him like
have the
40 times a
timer.
day.
We're not-
Like, yo, you alright?
Time.
You
Oh.
need
We're almost
anything?
too late
You
for the
alright?
timer
Because I
at this
felt
point.
like helpless.
It's
And
acting
I
really
felt like I
weird.
was like, if there was something I could do, you know, you would go
What
to
if
the
you
ends of
put
the
in
earth
1
for your
o'clock
children,
and then put
you
a
know,
countdown
that's just
timer?
the way it is.
Mhm.
You know, like, you have the privilege to work alongside of your dad,
Mhm.
whether it be on a lacrosse field, or whether
This
it be
is
in an
weird.
office, or whether it be
It's
here in
not supposed to be
the studio.
doing this.
Mhm.
Okay.
So when that situation gets thrown into a flux situation where, like, you know, the
I'll play it
uncertainty
later.
of that situation is called into question,
Is
you're
it
just
laying
like,
down on the audio, or
your-
is
your
it just?
life.
Yeah, everything's down, I think.
is greatly changed.
Mhm.
And like, what you come to realize is that, like, the only thing you have is each other.
Mhm.
No matter how bad it gets, like, you just have one another. And that's like, for us, when mom speaks, you know, it's a way for her, she gets to share
Yeah.
her son with kids that have a commonality with her.
Yeah, the
with
passion for the
him,
game that he loves.
You know, yeah, exactly, and in a way. it
You
allows-
all played, right? All the Colleluori boys?
Yeah, we all, I was the one who, I did not play, I play now, interestingly enough.
Really?
Yeah, I got turned on to the game late.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was actually a swimmer. I had a lot of success swimming collegiate, you know, in high school. I pursued it collegiately, and it just, the commitment just crushed me. and I ended up playing rugby. I had a really successful.
Where'd you go to
rugby
school?
career. I went to Westchester University.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did.
I got great athletics.
Yeah, it was great, and so I played there.
They got a great women's team.
Yeah,
Women's lacrosse.
their women's team's legit.
They always win that conference.
Yep.
We send kids to that conference a lot.
Yeah.
East Stroudsburg's big for us.
Yeah, PSAC,
Mercyhurst.
And for me, my younger two brothers were always, sure. My younger two brothers certainly like gravitated more towards lacrosse, and what's funny is like it indirectly became something that I do, you know, which is cool. I had a chance to coach against my brothers though in high school. That was a neat experience.
Oh, you coached high school?
Yeah, I did. So right after I had got involved with the game, you know, when I was like maybe a senior in high school.
How'd you do it?
So
I had
got
a bunch of
introduced to it
settings.
late, but knew enough about it and became enough of a fan about that I started coaching right right out of college. I
And just
got
turn it
asked
off when
to
you
help
get
out
on
with this JD team and
Okay.
was with them for a little while. And my brothers
All
at
right.
the time were on this string of like 3 consecutive state championships, right?
Now, is there a way
They
to
were a powerhouse, they were like a
maximize, like, put the
dynasty
image
in,
on the second
in, I
camera?
mean,
Oh, really?
Brent Hoyer, Bill
What's that?
McClone,
You want to have
Matt
that output?
Ryan.
So he played
At
Ridley.
the same time?
Okay.
His high school played Ridley a couple of years ago at Penn,
Yeah.
and I went to the game. I don't know if you remember. You with me at that? I think you were with me.
Yeah, that was that
When they were razzing, the Ridley kids were sitting up top, and they were razzing Ian Laviano.
I'm sure enough for-
And get your first
but,
camera set
like,
up in
so,
your preview window,
Coming up through that, like,
unless you want to use the numbers like
because I
front.
got to coach against them.
All I have to do is.
What high school
press
you
this
at?
to Start this.
Well, I was at
What's that?
Unionville High School.
Well, that's the first, right?
That's the
We start
first thing
with
to
that.
do, but
He's
have
my coach,
your first
so I
camera
had
set
a
up in your
chance
preview
to
window.
coach.
Okay, so that would be this one,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
it was cool. It was
Yeah,
a lot
that's
of
awesome.
fun, so.
Oh, because you're doing that next.
Well, oh, no, not next is gonna be,
It'll be Corey.
So how long have you been doing the podcast?
So we've done this
Okay.
for
So you play the, no,
it's
no,
our third technical season.
you're gonna play Corey
About a year
first.
and a half.
Yeah,
We met
and then
for
we're gonna
He's
go-
gonna say we're gonna start the show.
Yeah.
right.
Corey,
And,
hate to interrupt you.
yeah, sure.
So we're gonna start with you on camera.
Okay.
Then you're gonna say, okay, let's start the show. We're gonna do the BYG Open.
Yep.
When do the first two things?
Right
happen?
So I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna be like, all right, Pat Colleluori of the Headstrong Foundation's on with us. You know, before we get into
You got 30
you know, why
seconds.
he's here today,
Yeah.
we're gonna you know hear from our recruiting partner in Sports Recruits and one of our partners in Epic
So
Lacrosse.
which one do we play first?
Doesn't matter. You
Okay.
can play the Sports
Okay,
Recruits one
so
first.
he's gonna
That's ready
come
to
on.
go.
Okay.
Yep.
He's gonna say the show's gonna start.
Yep.
But you heard it.
Yep.
Okay, so you're set to go.
Okay, we have to turn the volumes up now,
Yeah,
ready?
so turn 'em-
3
yeah, turn 'em-
seconds.
Mics are going up now, guys.
Oh, ready to go? Okay. Cool. Getting through that.
We're starting in about 20 seconds, but your mics are up. They're gonna be hot.
Okay.
Am I looking anywhere? Looking at
So
you?
you can look to me if someone asks a question because it's live,
Yeah.
You're
which is
ready?
pretty cool.
Live, Mike, you wanna cut that?
You can talk to them and answer it through there,
Perfect.
but it's really just a conversation
Bring on
between
Corey.
us, like a
That's awesome.
podcast.
Number two,
So,
overlay turn.
yeah, it's all good.
Okay,
Ready?
now bring
Here
in
we go.
Corey.
Bring up Corey before the
Yep,
promo?
yep.
Oh, okay.
All right, we live here.
You're live.
All right, we are live on our next episode of Beyond the Game. Hope everyone's doing well today. We have a fantastic guest representing an unbelievable organization that is entrenched in the lacrosse world and beyond. It's not just about the lacrosse community, but I'm sure our audience is predominantly from the lacrosse world, which is pretty neat. So Pat Colleluori of the Headstrong Foundation. And Pat, real quick, how's everything going today, man? Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you for your hospitality, Corey. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, man, it's good to have you up on Long Island. And before we get into all the amazing things that the organization's doing, what your role and responsibilities are, and what your family has done to help so many people, thousands, you know, and we're going to talk about numbers that are going to, I think, astound a lot of people listening. We're going to give everyone a piece of recruiting advice from Sports Recruits, which is our recruiting partner for Beyond the Game. And we're also going to cut to a quick video from one of our huge presenting sponsors of the Beyond the Game show, which is Epic Lacrosse. So a quick break here. You take a video of you playing great at multiple events, you know, or even at just one event, and you could repurpose that on a daily basis. A coach can watch it anytime, any place, on their phone, on their laptop. They can watch it multiple times. And you're getting your name out there along with other pieces of information that maybe they didn't have when they were at the event watching you play. It's kind of like a commonsensical approach, right, when you go about it that way. Demonstrate and educate our audience.
Are you ready?
All right, so we're back live on Beyond the Game with Pat from Headstrong, and this is a really special show because I think Headstrong is something that, at least for me personally, I experienced growing up as a college player, playing in a Headstrong. It was one of those amazing fall classic warm-up tournaments, and that's when I first heard about the organization and learned about your brother's story and why your family's so motivated to help more people. But I think what's really cool and unique about the timing as to why you're up here and having you on is where the organization is going, which we'll definitely talk about today.
Sure.
So do you want to just give some light on what is the Headstrong Foundation, what's your mission, and what was your brother Nick's vision?
Sure. So the Headstrong Foundation is an amazing organization that serves as a key and vital resource to families in the most vulnerable time of their life. The focus of the organization is to working directly as boots on the ground to interface with families, helping them to live as normal of a life as possible. So our mission in a nutshell is to improve lives affected by cancer. And under that, what the organization provides is a combination of financial, emotional, logistical, and residential services that enables families to truly go the distance in their fight against cancer.
So your brother Nick, unfortunately, he fought it. He went through it. I understand, obviously, it affected him personally, and he had to go through a lot. How does it affect other people? Some people may not understand the impact of how maybe a loved one having cancer affects them. Can you just maybe share that? Because obviously it's not something easy to talk about, but it's also important for people to understand that it affects you mentioned lives. I'm sure you're not just referring to the lives of people who have cancer, but also everyone else around them too.
Exactly. I mean, there's certainly a ripple effect when you hear the word cancer. It sends shockwaves through a community. For my brother Nicholas experiencing a terminal cancer diagnosis at 19 years old, despite what he was going through and being able to process, being terminal and just coping with that and grasping that idea that this was something that, potentially the cards were stacked against him. His concern shifted to the well-being of the people that he cared most about, and his desire to create the organization was predicated on serving as the resource that he wished existed for our own family when the rug was ripped out from under him. One of the saddest things that we had to go through was just navigating the shortcomings and the pitfalls and the lack of accessibility and the challenges of affordability and trying to navigate healthcare. And again, what Nick realized was that he had a platform. And but I will definitely say that his concern was for the well-being of the people that he cared most about. And indirectly, our world was thrown into a flux situation. I mean, we were deeply concerned for Nick. And interestingly enough, it was hitting that point of desperation when you truly realize who has your back. And I will tell people all the time why the Headstrong Foundation is so vested in lacrosse and so focused in doing great things in lacrosse and through lacrosse is because this was the community of people that carried our family through the darkest times of our life. And that's exactly the level of support that we take to serving families every day who find themselves in the same situation.
Talk a little bit about that family that kind of gathered around you and Nick personally. Tell people your brother's involvement and your family's involvement in the sport. Where did he play? And how has your family's involvement with that particular program grown to maybe other people within the lacrosse community?
Sure. I mean, one thing that we've always said is that the sport of lacrosse, what makes it so dynamic and so unique is the fraternal nature of the game, the bond that people that play this sport share. We've had the privilege of witnessing that over the past 13 years as an organization, and prior to that as a family, just living a normal life. And lacrosse brought out the absolute best in my family. It provided opportunities to my brothers to pursue the game collegiately, and that was really their dream. They loved being part of a team. Nicholas loved the idea of being part of something bigger than himself. Interestingly enough, he created this organization, which now is in the embodiment of all that he believed. But lacrosse was a game that, naturally fit and suited his attitude, his and his skill set. He was a constant student of the sport. Nicholas was a short stick, defensive-minded midfielder, but anchored a team from a defensive standpoint in high school, and believe it or not, didn't really understand positional play of close defense until he got to Hofstra University, where he was really taken under the wing of John Orson, who really taught him how to play the sport, and more importantly, the position. Nick was a fierce competitor. And he had this willingness and this drive to push himself harder than anyone. And indirectly, that made people around him better. He held himself to a very high level of accountability. He loved competing. He loved pushing himself so hard. I mean, he was a 3-sport captain, multi-sport athlete, state champion across the board, somebody that always knew athletics was going to be part of his life. He desired to be an educator. And what's interesting is that today, that's exactly what, Headstrong's all about. And so having the opportunity to play athletics at a high level, Nick recognized it as an opportunity. He was someone that, had this willingness to be a student of the sport. When he was recruited by John Danowski and Joe Amplo, it was his dream to see the field, to be part of the blue and gold of Hofstra, to be woven into the fabric of that program. I think it's one of the biggest highlights of my life to see how Nick's legacy has been woven into the fabric of that athletic program, just to know that he played such a pivotal role in his journey against cancer, and just he as a person had such a permanent, I guess, change.
Impact.
Yeah, his impact.
His impact, exactly.
Yeah.
On that program and athletes across the country. At the end of the day, Nick was a regular guy.
Yeah.
He was a kid that desired to play lacrosse at a high level. He was someone who dreamed of playing lacrosse with his younger brother. That dream came true for 2 weeks before the rug was ripped out from under us with his cancer diagnosis. So.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Nick's vision, and how has his vision kind of come to light, and how has it transformed over the years? And I'm sure that dovetails into kind of the mission of the organization and what you guys are doing to help so many people.
I mean, what Nick's witnessed firsthand was the lack of available resources for patients and families, specifically that surrounding affordability and accessibility to treatment. We found ourselves in a position of needing assistance, not having guidance, really in a vulnerable situation, especially with respect to the challenges of family dynamics. We were blessed to be 15 minutes from a world-class medical center at the Abramson Cancer Center at University of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
But, Nicholas was here in Long Island at the time of his diagnosis, and so we really didn't understand cancer. We didn't understand the severity of his diagnosis.
Yep.
Naturally, Nick had overcome all obstacles leading up to this, and so naturally we thought he would just receive treatment and be back at school right away, and that was kind of how we approached it. What unfolded was one of the most tragic and fearful times of our life. We watched a young man playing Division I lacrosse within 14 months become wheelchair bound and a shell of his former self. Interestingly enough, his attitude and morale never wavered, despite physically being 120 pounds.
Yeah.
What was incredible was that, what Nick's concern was during his treatment wasn't so much for his well-being, but for the well-being of others. Most importantly, the ones around him, the ones he cared for most. That is exactly why he used the time in the hospital constructively to carve the mission of the Headstrong Foundation, which was predicated on taking care of families in the most vulnerable time of their life, helping them to make life-altering decisions with confidence.
Yep.
Taking care of the things that people weren't talking about. How do we ensure families can pursue the best possible care? Okay, what exactly are these families up against? When people hear the word cancer, does it equate to a death sentence? When people hear the word cancer, it instills such fear in them. But a lot of times, people don't really know, the duration of treatment. They don't really know how it's going to affect them. Family dynamics are different. Affordability is different for people. Healthcare is different for people. And with that being said, accessibility to potentially life-saving treatments is a crapshoot for a lot of people that people sometimes don't have access to.
Sure.
These were the things that were being overshadowed, and these were the things that concerned Nicholas most. His desire to be normal, his desire to get back to school, his desire to be a 20-year-old kid and just have life back to the way it was prior to his diagnosis were at the forefront of his concern. the well-being of his fiance, those type of things. And more importantly, Nick carried a great deal of guilt, knowing that something that was uncontrollably happening to him was having such a devastating toll on the people that he cared most about, specifically my mom and dad, who were honestly scared, financially shot, and just emotionally stressed to a point where you and I could not process.
Yeah, I mean, that's really sad, and like just shows like the selflessness in your brother to even think like that. I feel like a lot of people going through something so difficult, a lot of times the focus is really just on themselves because they're going through so much. But for him to kind of go outside himself and understand how it's impacting others, just kind of shows you the type of not just person he was, but player he was, and friend
It's
he
ironic.
was.
It's ironic. As you talk about Nick, it's ironic that his position was short stick D midi, because I always talk about short stick D middies. I always say it's the most important position on the field, and the reason I say that from a lacrosse standpoint is everybody offensively attacks the short stick D midi. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have great short stick D middies, your team falters. Yeah. So it's they're the most unsung hero on the team.
It's one of the hardest positions.
It
it's
is
a position
the
most kids don't want to play. It's a position that doesn't get the glory. It doesn't show up in the stat book. It's just It's a true
and the most
reflection on Nick.
team-oriented kids.
Yeah.
I mean, we just talked about two Hofstra kids who you grew up playing with, who were I think they were a couple years behind Nick. Steve DiNapoli, who's on the USA team, and Timmy Holman, who coaches at Garden City High School. Two of the greatest D middies ever to play at Hofstra after your brother. And it's just funny. We know those kids really well, and they're the most selfless human beings you ever met.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting because one of Nicholas's teammates was Kevin Understein.
Sure.
Oh,
And when I go
What
back
an
and
athlete.
see, when I go back and play, who were the most positionally sound and well-equipped and relentless athletes that I ever had the chance to witness, Kevin is by far the quintessential defensive midfielder. And like I said, Nick and Kevin had a really special connection.
Yeah.
And so I will definitely say that, lacrosse and the idea of being part of a team certainly was a precursor to Nick's desire to create the idea of Headstrong.
Yeah.
This concept of being a team.
Sure.
Realizing that in this moment, team was family.
Right.
And what I mean by that is like, I want you to put yourself in the position of my brother. Here he was, 19 years old, terminally ill in a hospital bed. His mother and father were doing everything feasibly possible to assure him that he was going to be okay, even though they didn't know if he would be. They would keep Nick cool. They would keep Nick focused on constructivism and positivity, right? And yet, Nicholas' concern was the fact that, like, his mom didn't have a reclining chair so that she could take a load off after working a full day, or his dad had a place to relax while caring for his son. The food was terrible. I remember my brother making a pact with my dad saying, look, no matter what, I don't want to eat the food here in this hospital, because, like I said, it was the little things.
Yeah.
It was those little things that aid in the mental well-being and the morale of a patient, and Nick recognized that. Entertainment outlets, technology has changed so much, but there was a time where Nicholas had this little DVD player, and John Danowski used to overnight him game videos so that he could actually watch the game and stay connected to his team. But like outlets of entertainment, when I go back and I think about all the little things, just the desire to just be active, getting out and walking the halls and all these things. What Nick was planning, he was documenting and realizing these are the things that affect the morale of a patient. Okay, it's hard enough to stare at a clock and realize the minutes ticking and how long that takes. If you were to stare at a watch for 30 seconds, you come to realize just how long of a time period that is, even though it's a blink.
Yeah.
But what Nick realized was that all those little things were amounting into a bigger problem. Those ancillary things were contributing negatively to the people that he cared most about. The idea of the shoelaces that Nicholas created, which we became synonymous with, was conceived from his bed looking down on the campus of the University of Pennsylvania and seeing kids like yourself, Corey, walking to their class, to their practices, to their apartments, and his desire to go outside during a 45-day inpatient stay. He recognized that shoelaces were universal, that they represented the first thing you do when you start your day. okay? Nick just wanted to go outside. He wanted to walk to the bio pond to be relieved of some of the stress that he was enduring. And so, you know, where our journey began was in this decision that Nick recognized that his journey through cancer could serve for the betterment of others. And that's how he decided, no matter how bad it got, to create this organization. And in the latter part of his life, he asked our family, he gifted this organization, because what this organization has allowed our family to do is constructively move forward through life in his absence.
Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of Nick's House? Why is it so impactful? And, you know, talk about how you took some of the things that were essentially shortcomings that weren't really thought through, that really maybe wouldn't be something that would even be factored into the recovery of not just patients, but patients' loved ones, thanks to your brother. And talk about how you kind of took some of those things that maybe he documented and applied them to Nick's House and beyond and what's going on there.
Well, it starts with the experience of our family.
Yeah.
Because what we witnessed and what we endured was a healthcare crisis in and of itself, and that is lodging. Okay, cancer-related lodging for treatment. It was a opportunity that we seized. Two very turning points in the direction of our mission became when Nicholas was going through treatment. We had actually met a family living out of the parking garage of the hospital that he was receiving treatment at. And what had happened was my father had just put a 10-hour workday in. He had gotten to the hospital. He's standing in line to pay for parking. It was an unexpected expense, $210 a week to pay to park your car just to go care for your child. And he had struck up a conversation with a gentleman who was also on the floor caring for his daughter. And the gentleman started saying to my father that he was wondering where he might be able to get a shower. And my dad said, well, where are you staying? You know, they just started talking, small talk. You know, they were living a very similar reality. And the man, choking back tears, admitted that he and his wife were living out of the car, that they had traveled 4.5 hours away from home so that their daughter could undergo a life-saving bone marrow transplant, and that due to the affordability and just the feasibility of things, they didn't have a place to stay. So they were taking shifts. He would sleep in the car while his wife was caring for his daughter, and they would just take shifts on and off. And so we ended up welcoming this family into our own home because we were 15 minutes away from the medical center, and that started the ball turning. In the latter part of my brother Nick's journey against cancer, we were displaced to Bethesda, Maryland in the pursuit of a clinical trial, and we bared witness to the lack of available resources for families. And so the idea of lodging folks came from our own personal experience. We witnessed it, and we saw the healthcare crisis, and we decided to create a solution. And that's going back to Nicholas's vision. Nick was about creating solutions.
Yeah.
So while it was one thing to point out the hardships of the uncomfortable bed and the lack of recliners for my mom, or the fact that the entertainment outlets in the hospital were terrible and the food was terrible, as opposed to just pointing out the negativity, Nick put together constructive measures that now serve as the solution to those things. All right. So again, having bared witness to a family that was literally living out of their car, and the only thing preventing them from asking for help was pride. I mean, it takes a great deal of pride to swallow to ask for help.
Yeah.
We know what that's like.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I love most about this foundation is the authenticity, the fact that we know what it's like to live in the shoes of the people we serve. That is one of the most humbling things that our organization brings to the table, because we know what it's like even to lose someone in triumph over tragedy, right? And so understanding that, okay, the idea that this wasn't right, that it's hard enough for a family to endure this treatment, but then not have the financial stability to be able to have the comforts of home while they're so far away from their home. How could we make that happen for them? So we opened our first Nick's House, and we found ourselves in a really interesting dilemma, and that was, while we were welcoming families from all over the country, we were at capacity. We were turning away more families than we could accommodate.
Right.
We started to understand that just in Philadelphia alone, there was 250 families per quarter in need of lodging. And the reality is that despite the hospitality industry, that is an industry. It's not adequately designed to meet the needs of people with immunosensitivities and, and financial hardship. So when you start to think about the fact that in the city of Philadelphia and major metropolitan areas that the average hotel accommodation per night is about $300. The weekends, it jumps to $400. You have a special event that's happening in the city, it jumps even higher. So, with that being said, we felt that this was the best way to carve a complement, something unique to our service mission, something that made us different, and something that allowed us to play such a hands-on role helping these families in the most critically needed time of their life. Think about something. When somebody's diagnosed, and I'll use leukemia as an example, the average pediatric protocol is 36 months, okay? At a certain point in time, 18 to 24 months down the road, that's when somebody starts to experience financial hardship. 1 in 3 families are going to have to turn to their friends and family for help at some point in time during their journey. The average leukemia protocol in this case is 36 months. It's 3 years. That's if they're not sidelined by something else, right? So for a family that's been in the fight for upwards of 3 years, what do you think their financial position is at that point, 36 months? Being a caregiver, caring for someone that, requires them not to be going to work, not to be producing income, Sadly, in our country, not everyone has a job at the time of the diagnosis, right? Not everyone, especially people who are self-employed. You don't necessarily think about the extent of your health care until you're in a position of needing it, right?
Right.
So for these families, one of the challenges becomes, okay, what is the deterrent from pursuing something that may save their life? Affordability is at the top of the list. So we wanted to make it possible for families to be able to go the distance against their cancer. We wanted to make it realistic. We wanted, at the end of the day, what we've come to realize at Headstrong is that we can't control the fact that someone has cancer, okay? That's really not our focus. But even based on our own experience, we know no matter what, we went the distance. We turned over every rock, every leaf, and in the way of that, there's comfort knowing that we did that. There's no regret.
Yeah.
We felt confident in making decisions even though Nick didn't respond to treatment. And so we wanted to afford families the ability to do just that. Control that controllable.
Yep.
That's at the end of the day what Headstrong is devoted to.
Right.
Making it possible. Lodging. What we come to realize is that in the greater metro, the New York metropolitan area, you're looking at 450 families.
Right.
Okay, the need for lodging is double. So the vision, Nick's vision, was to be able to play that constructive role when a family needed it most, to be that resource that they could turn to.
Yeah.
Are you really close to Penn? Is the house really close to?
We sit in the suburbs. We're in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania. And that's
okay.
designed specifically because for families that are, for Nick's house, we have an expansive guest family lodge in the suburbs of Philadelphia that provides 3,000 nights of housing each year to folks that are displaced. That equates to $2.5 million in out-of-pocket expenses relieved, and it welcomes families from all across the country, and it is always at occupancy. We are fully occupied at all times from families from all over the country, from Alabama to Richmond to California. I mean, everything that we do is intended to give these families and arm them with the comforts necessary to have respite and recovery in a way that's also beneficial. They're living communally amongst other families, and it's not just children. We serve the geriatric community as well, and also, think about it, adults.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's really an important resource to the medical centers because what it allows is them to expand their patient base as well. And it
Can you talk about the experience that happened recently with the Penn State lacrosse team and their visit?
Well, sure. I mean, so, our organization has proudly operated within NCAA athletics for the past 13 years. And not just in NCAA athletics, but we've been woven into the fabric of the sport of lacrosse. From the youth side of the game to the high school, to the club, to the varsity level collegiate programs, all the way to the professional leagues as well, through partnerships with National League Lacrosse, Premier League Lacrosse, as well as Major League Lacrosse over the years. We've had some great partnerships with brands, but what's interesting is that, because the story has been heavily rooted in the sport of lacrosse, I don't necessarily know at times if people have seen beyond that. And so, when you think about the fact that we've served more than 18,000 families, and each year we're affording and providing 3,000 nights of housing, and we are taking and playing such an instrumental and vital role in the lives of people across the country. What's interesting is that when you see and we welcome families to Nick's house, and when we're able to do that, what you see is a connectivity. It's like, wow, I had no idea. And I'll talk a little bit about Penn State men's lacrosse.
Sure.
Because we always are welcoming teams. We kind of embrace our geography in a sense that we have 40 colleges in the greater Philadelphia area. A greater majority of them, there's 5 Division I lacrosse programs literally within 20 minutes of Nick's house.
Right.
So we are always extending invitations to teams. And just last week, Penn State men's lacrosse came down, and prior to their game at Penn, they had the opportunity to visit Nick's house. And I was able to educate them on our journey as a family and that of our foundation. And it was amazing because for them, they've supported the organization through wearing laces and wearing socks and raising money through our fall event series and growing mustaches in the fall. But for them to actually encounter families and witness what it is that we do personally, it was like, wow, I thought I knew what Headstrong was. I now know who you are, and you have our full support. And I actually received an email from Grant Ament that evening saying just what perspective it brought to the team. And it was funny because he had mentioned that when he was an 8-year-old kid, he had taken the field wearing laces and had a Headstrong lacrosse handle, but never really understood exactly what that meant until he stepped into Nick's house and he saw what it is that we do. It really gave him a lot of perspective. And he said, you know what, you had my support at 8 years old. You have my commitment at 20. And what's amazing is that, we're going to continue to offer that. I'm telling you, we've had teams from all over the country, from Maryland to Virginia, to Robert Morris, to Hofstra, to Drexel. I mean, you name the teams. They get a chance to witness Nick's house. We just had Trevor Baptiste at the house. And he said, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Lars Tiffany, same thing. I had no idea. And I think what's amazing is that when these people that are influencers in our sport have that endorsement, because they see the level of authenticity and just what it is that we're providing, they take pride in it. Because as well as I know, lacrosse is a small fraternity. It's a family. And for them, it's giving great assurance that the support that they've given previously and that they'll continue to give is having the utmost impact for people that need it most. They can see it. It's real. It's tangible. They can grasp it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're excited to do here in New York.
Yeah. Talk about we have about 5 minutes left here. With you talk about the numbers, they're staggering, and they need support in this area.
Yeah.
How do you even approach that? How's your organization going to say okay, there needs to be support here. We kind of have an idea of where we need to go. We're not really sure, but how does that process work? And then once you guys are here, what are your plans to get? Maybe what's a more grassroots effort and approach to getting some of the maybe even lacrosse programs or people in the lacrosse community involved in what you're doing in this area?
Well, and that's the beautiful thing. I mean, when I go back to when we constructed Nick's house, you got to remember something. We renovated a home that was 125 years old. Okay, we had 45 contractors and 8 unions on that project, right?
Yeah.
But in addition to that, there was Cabrini University swinging hammers, tearing walls down.
Yeah.
So, what's interesting is that as this thing comes to life, this is going to engage the lacrosse community in a brand new way.
Sure.
This is a chance for the lacrosse community of Long Island and New York as a whole to come together, right, and to do something constructive. Right now, we've built out, and we're continuing to build out our steering committee. We've worked and we've created our feasibility study and geographical analysis with Villanova University. And what we've done is we've also aligned and are working closely with Memorial Sloan Kettering, and we've built out our list of tangible non-negotiables on behalf of their patient base.
Right.
This home hopefully will serve multiple hospitals, and we want to make it expansive enough where it can allow us to begin to carve a dent. And when I say carve a dent, we're talking right now there's 450 families per quarter in need of cancer-related lodging in New York, okay? Now, with that being said, we hope to be able to carve 10% of that. Now, that's significantly more than what's currently being met, right?
Sure.
That's another 3,000 nights of housing each year. That's another 2.5 million. And what's amazing is that this Long Island lacrosse community, this New York lacrosse community can embrace this project
Yeah.
and actually contribute to something in their community that's helping families afford the best possible care available in their communities.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Is that what you're building in Astoria?
That's our plan. Our plan is we're honing in on some areas, Astoria being one of them. It's going to be about a 36-month process. We're really excited to do it. We've seen firsthand over the past 8 years what a resource it's been. And you know what? It allows Headstrong to really play a vital role and a complementary role, if you will. So you want to talk about Nick being a complementary role player on a lacrosse field. It's beautiful that the house in his name is now such a complementary role player to families as well as the medical centers. It's the most critically needed because when a family is financially devastated, they're in a spot where, again, the difference between them actually pursuing something and relocating in the sake of treatment is all affordability related.
Right.
You know?
How does someone get access to Nick's house?
Nick, we actually have boots on the ground. We have social workers on staff at Headstrong that interface with the patients and families directly. We have an application process, and a lot of times what happens is that it'll be a social worker from the health system that interfaces with us, and we schedule that out well in advance, especially if somebody needs, like, we have a family that's been with us right now for 5 months
Right.
Wow.
from Richmond, Virginia. 5 months. They just underwent a bone marrow transplant. People don't realize it's a 120-day post-op. You have to live within a commutable distance of the health center for daily infusions, scans, as well as appointments. So you don't have the luxury of going home.
Right.
So that's what we're able to provide.
And all the great things that the organization is doing and is going. I mean, obviously one of the driving forces behind this show with you today is to get the word out.
Sure.
But where else can people kind of see, what you guys are up to and follow your story?
I mean, certainly people can go to headstrong.org. People can follow us on Instagram, social media, Headstrong FND. We have a very expansive social media presence. We have the largest active social community amongst cancer organizations in the United States, which is amazing. Primarily made up of 18 to 24-year-olds, people that are in a position of now, getting involved, which is beautiful. Anytime you see us, people can go online and purchase Headstrong laces and dedicate games. I encourage lacrosse clubs from across the country to continue to support the work of the Headstrong Foundation. What's amazing is that we do have a club, and it's beautiful because, that's the connection that people get a chance to see us. That's the arena where lacrosse sees Headstrong, right?
Yeah.
So we say at the end of the day, cancer's not defined by a club. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's all about working together.
Sure.
Okay? Finding those unique ways. Dedicating games during your high school season. We have platforms that allow kids to pledge their performance statistics as a mechanism. We have a campaign called Go Lime. There's been things like Pledge It, where that allows us to use a performance-based statistic and use it as a mechanism for securing recurring contributions. We have kids across the country pledging their face-offs, pledging their goals, pledging their ground balls, their saves. So it's creating the fun ways that athletes can use their platform to advance the mission. I think that's really one
I
of
think
the
that's
most
that's a cool concept. I think that's something we can drive through our own social channels because we have in the LI Lax Journal, we have one of the most engaged audiences on Long Island, and it's an incredible community because we just post original content that promotes the kids. We drive everything through. Okay, how can we make this a better experience for a kid who's involved in Long Island lacrosse? Right. One example of someone who's a partner works closely with us is Chris Gill of Crease Beast. I'm going to talk to him and I'm going to give him a shout out because he does an amazing job just focusing on true development of a goalie in the right way. He promotes his kids. He helps them through the recruiting process. But he's also the type of person, I guarantee if I said, hey, can we get some of your goalies who train with you to pledge how many saves they get towards the Headstrong Foundation? He'd be the first person, I'm sure, to say, that's a great idea. Let's do it. So
I think we should start a campaign amongst all of the kids on Long Island, both boys and girls, both as far as facing off goalies, even the ground balls in course tournaments. See, we're big on the stats that the people don't talk about.
Yeah, we,
it.
we
I
developed
agree.
our website. We developed a little over a year ago. We've have almost 1 million views on this website.
That's right. That's
and
excellent.
one of the driving forces behind it is the statistics. And we said we're not just doing goals, assists, and saves for goalies.
Yeah.
We have face-offs, cost turnovers, and
Draw
we also have ground
controls
balls
for
and
girls.
draw controls. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about your brother. I mean, every player, every position, it matters. The kids on the bench matter. How kids celebrate and support one another's teammates. We promote all that. So
Yeah, that's cool.
I think that's something we can definitely drive through the community and help promote, all the great things you're doing. And
Well, that's at the end of the day, what we realize is that, the more we do equates to the more we can do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a simple philosophy to grasp. I realize that everyone has a voice, everyone has a platform. Lacrosse is something that, again, brings people together.
Yeah.
Headstrong is something that, despite where you're from or what your club affiliation is or what school you play for or what position you are, cancer affects us all. And we're privileged enough to have the ability to shine light and have the voice to shift the dialogue. This is about taking care of families. This is about helping them through the darkest times of their life with clarity, being that source of encouragement and support, giving them the ability to go the distance, right? And at the end of the day, afford them the same level of support that the lacrosse community did provide to my family when the rug was ripped out from us, right?
Sure.
And so I'll tell you what, what I love most is when I see kids connect with our mission. Maybe they're honoring a member of their family that's affected. They lace up. They have the lime green goals. Those type of things. What's amazing is that goes back to what Nick thought about in a hospital bed. Those were his original thoughts. I love being able to share who Nick was with everyone because, like I said, we talked earlier, you see kids that are in college now, they were 8 and 9 years old when Nick was diagnosed. Kids playing in high school now were 3. So it's like, this is a way for them to know who Nick was, to experience and be part of something that's so inherent and so special that it even maybe strengthens their commitment to the sport indirectly. I mean, I think in the world of our sport, helping kids realize their best versions of themselves is what it's all about, right? And this is something that helps kids be more holistic as student athletes because, the way I approach every day of my life is, try to treat others in the same vein that, that you're treated. And with that being said, when you need help most, you want to know that someone has your back, right? I mean, that's what lacrosse gave to my family. This sport put our family on their shoulders and continues to carry us year over year. And the way that we can pay gratitude to the people that support us is by continuing to evolve and show continued momentum and increased support to the people we serve. It's like the way we show support or the way we show our appreciation is by doing more.
Sure.
Nick's House, New York is doing more.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So
we
appreciate your commitment.
Yeah, of course. We appreciate your time and sharing your story and the vulnerable moments that your family went through. I know it's not easy, but it's impactful, and I think it's important, it's imperative, and it shows the authenticity of who you are and what your family's about and who Nick was. So it's all good stuff. So before we conclude our show, we have a quick word from our sponsor, Epic Lacrosse, and we'll be seeing everyone throughout the spring here, and you can also just if you didn't see the show live today, you can watch it later on our YouTube channel. We'll be putting that out there on YouTube, and we'll be repurposing it through our Long Island Lacrosse Journal so our fans can see.
Well, thanks.
Come up with a really good campaign.
This is the beginning of meditation.
Where we matched the kids, and then that way, you know what I'm saying? Also, get the shoelaces. We covered a bulk order.
No, stop the stream.
And then what we could do is we can kind of roll out and do a campaign, kind of build a campaign